What is up, fight fans? It is 1 o'clock out there in the Mile High City. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We're coming to you live from the number 38 presented by Volo. Just when you thought it was about to get warmer over the weekend, it is wetter than a pre-sweat dreams after visiting the daycare outside, ladies and gentlemen. And I cannot wait for the summer months. I'm tired of having to throw on the hoodies and the sweats at this point. I don't know about you guys, but that tease over the weekend with the sunshine, I'm ready for summer. I'm ready for it. I want to give a shout out to the whole crew here at the Mile High Sports Network. They are the go-to guys for all things in the core four of sports. Naturally, with CU, there is plenty of headlines throughout this offseason. It'll be interesting to see how all of the Coach Prime situation with the CU and the faithful goes out there. I know that there's a lot of unrest within the CU Buff football community out there. A lot of the alumni have spoken out against the whole jersey situation, which, you know, there's plenty of discussion from all of those conversations and from the different outlets to cover that there, or for our different folks here at the Mile High Sports Network. The NFL is fresh off of the draft. There's going to be the off-season headlines or ramping up into training camp and OTAs. There is NHL playoffs. Sadly, the Avs got eliminated in Game 7 action over the weekend. The NBA playoffs, you have you have the Nuggets continuing to push forward. They won series. They had a what was it, game 1 last night of the other series?
Yeah, game 1 in Oklahoma City, and they stole one.
Yeah, stole one on the road. I knew
Aaron Gordon again.
Aaron Gordon win at the very end, but I didn't know what number in the series it was. Just yeah, there you have it right there, folks. I get my news from Danny. I get my news from the Nuggets from Danny. That's here, these guys at the Mile High Sports Network. But throughout like the year, I have to just for at this point, the humor in it, we're going to keep track of a running tally of the Rockies record, which could very well be a historic season, ladies and gentlemen, as the losingest season in Major League Baseball history. Right now, they're sitting at 6-28. When we first started reading off the record, like the first week of the season, like a month ago, there was 3 wins. In a month, they've only doubled that. That's pretty abysmal when we're looking at it from a statistical standpoint there. Make sure that you check up or keep your tabs on those Mile High Sports channels. Hit that like, share, and subscribe wherever possible for those. For the Colorado Rundown, want to give a shout out to the shows here that we have coming up on the next couple of weeks here in the Front Range area in Colorado. If you have the opportunity to get your tickets directly from the fighter, please do, whether that's paper tickets or using their promo code online. That greatly helps them. That's how they get commission, especially for these amateurs. That's the only way that they're actually really making money in the process. So all the support there greatly helps them. It also helps us in the process when you come out and support the events. We cannot do what we do without you. In a couple of weeks, we have Card-Jitsu. This is going to be our first event going down of the sort for CJJC. That is going to be going down, like I say, on May 24th. Keep your eyes peeled. We're going to be having more details on the event. We've released a few of the competitors that are going to be in the brackets. Follow the CJJC Cage on Instagram to see those. There's also going to be more information coming about for streaming time, all that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks. On May 31st at Island Grove, you have the No Coast Showdown going down for Sparta Sports and Entertainment. May 31st, Northern Colorado in Greeley. Check that out. A couple of weeks following there, you have Colorado Combat Club returning to action on Friday, June 13th. That is going to be at the Stampede. A few pro fights on the card. Be sure to check that out. We have a top-ranked flyweight matchup here between Kelvin Martinez, brother of Jonathan Martinez, taking on the Puerto Rican Demon, Alex Rego. We also have Connor Leonard taking on Bobby Zefrin, both friends of the program who are going to be getting after it there in the featherweight division, and a multitude of other fights that are going down there that you definitely want to check out. You have Guerrilla Fighting Championship making their debut show. It's going to be happening at the Pueblo Convention Center on June 21st. That's headlined by AJ Robb taking on Darian Robinson. that's going to be a clacker alone by itself right there in the main event. You also have friend of the program, Steel City Kid, Nico Cornejo, going to be in the co-main event there. The following weekend, you have 5280 going down with a Muay Thai matinee at the Stampede. That's going to be followed up that evening at the Colorado Springs City Hub for Battle MMA Championships. Our friend of the program, Chris Lalone, Relentless, he's going to be on that card. That's going to be his pro debut. That kid has such a bright future. Looking forward to see what he has in store there. I also believe Dylan Killer King is going to be on the card. So a few of our familiar faces from up and down these front range cards will be in action there. Give them a look. Support them if you can. Going to transition now and moving over into the weekend recap. We had the UFC that went down over the weekend in Des Moines. I messed up on my notes here. Didn't update the city there. We had UFC Fight Night, Sandhagen Figueiredo versus Sandhagen and Figueiredo. This was at the Wells Fargo Arena out there in Des Moines, Iowa. You know, the Midwest, they love combat sports. They're a huge spot for wrestling. For anybody who knows Big Ten action, that is one of the most live arenas in all of college sports. When you see some of those Big Ten duels, like you see that matchup there in Iowa when it's Penn State going up against Iowa, when it's Minnesota against Iowa, Ohio State against Iowa, all of those just top tier wrestling programs. That is such a hopping atmosphere that doesn't get the credit that it deserves in the energy world in terms of sports environments. It's not a mainstream sport, and wrestling is a very niche product out there. But for those who are just a fan of watching spectacle and entertainment and the vibe of energy, that's definitely something that I would encourage you to watch at some point in time. You know, next season, give that a look. I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised if you've never seen action there. Those fans definitely showed up and showed out, 15,000 plus strong in Des Moines. This was more than 25 years since the UFC has been in Des Moines, or I think might have been the first time in Des Moines, first back time in Iowa in 25 plus years. But they had a couple of guys who had local ties, one of them being a direct hometown kid in Little Heathen, Jeremy Stevens. But let's start off from the top. Let's go with the main event. You have Corey Sandhagen and Davison Figueiredo. Yes, there's going to be the talk that, oh, well, it was a knee injury that caused the stoppage, all that. Hogwash. It was a stoppage due to knee injury because of tactical errors by Davison Figueiredo. It's just as Corey said, like, he played the 50-50 position wrong and he got his knee popped. That shouldn't count against Corey. And this is also something that I preach to students in our jiu-jitsu classes and to the folks out there, period. There is a time for sport jiu-jitsu, and it's not always something that is applicable within an actual fight. When you're going for the legs and you're trying to get inverted or you're trying to attack the heel hooks the way that Davison Figueiredo was, you have two hands that are occupying a lower limb on your opponent while your face is right for the picking. Davison Figueiredo showed up and was in the process, you know, he was lost right away. You could tell that he was out of his element against Corey, who I believe is one of the highest fight IQ guys on the entire roster. But then he starts trying to have a jiu-jitsu match, and Corey Sandhagen showed up to fight, and Corey Sandhagen beat his ass. There is no way around it. There is no reason in sugarcoating it. Corey Sandhagen whipped him like he stole something from pillar to post. When you're trying to go for the legs in that way, you're going to get elbows dropped on your face. You're going to get hammer fisted. And when you take also into account, arguably the greatest leg locker that the UFC currently has on its roster is Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall also has 50-50 itself, ironically, within his Instagram handle name. But he was a cornerman for Corey Sandhagen in this fight. You think that they weren't prepared for these entanglements? You think that he wasn't well versed in this part of the game, and he's been working with Ryan Hall for years. That's why I say Corey Sandhagen, his fight IQ is so deep and broad that this man does not get the credit that he deserves. 2025 Corey Sandhagen right now absolutely deserves that next title shot. And I know that there's going to be the people out there who are saying that it should be Piotr Jan and all this. And Corey lost 2 fights ago to Umar. Well, he was a pretty competitive fight against Umar, and he took that fight against Umar when nobody else wanted to fight Umar. And he pushed him to the brink in that process. That performance the other night, sensational. When you take a look at the 2 guys who are fighting next, this summer for that title at 135, you have Merab defending against Sugar Sean O'Malley in a rematch that nobody really asked for. But what is the unique situation between those 2 guys who are vying for that next title fight in Piotr Jan and Corey Sandhagen? Piotr has lost to both Sean O'Malley and Merab. Corey Sandhagen hasn't fought either one of them. That is fresh blood that could come into the mix for the title right there, and I am all for it, personally. Again, I may be a little bit biased because of getting to see Corey develop from so long, coming from this Colorado footprint and area, seeing him on local cards, rise all the way up through the LFA, get into the UFC and go on a tear. And then also seeing the influence that his coaching and just the knowledge that he's passed on to this next generation has. I think he's one of the most underrated and the biggest gems in the entire sport right now that we have today. If you haven't checked out his YouTube or now seeing any of his skits that he's been doing to kind of open up and let his personality or let his sense of humor shine through a little bit, I encourage you to check it out. Like I say, Corey Sandhagen definitely deserves that next title shot at 135 pounds. Moving on from there, we had the co-main event. We had Reiner de Ridder, RDR, taking on Bo Nickel. This is what the kids like to call a fraud check. Now, this was the worst that Bo has looked, but I also think that we can't get lost in the sauce and forget just how good RDR also is. It's not exactly like he's chopped liver. He's not Val Woodburn. No disrespect to Val Woodburn. RDR was a multiple division champion over in one. Dimensionally, he was kind of a nightmare for Bo with some of the tactics that he presented, and especially when he brought in his Dutch style kickboxing, bringing those knees right up to the body and invest into the body early and often. Yeah, he exposed a lot of flaws in Bo's game. Bo's wrestling didn't even look as top tier as it typically, or what you would have expected for it too. This TKO in the body that way, I don't want to necessarily say I told you so, but one thing that I led on to last week was I questioned how much adversity is Bo being pushed to face in the training room? How much is he being protected? And I don't know that that is absolutely the case, but I can offer to you that his lack of experience in fighting 100% showed through the other night. His head coach, Mike Brown, even came out and said so, that, hey, he's been kind of fast-tracked and he's been rushed along in the process at only this short amount, in 8 fights, he's been put up to these top-tier type of opponents, which that's all valid. I don't deny that at all, which I actually agree with, that he's getting pushed too far too quick. But at the same time, that's not necessarily the UFC's fault. That's also Bo's doing. Bo has came out and he has taken a steaming Willie all over the top of the division ever since he entered the roster, coming out saying that he would mop up guys like Hamza and that he would tear through Dricus and he would make light work of some of the best contenders that 185 pounds has to offer. What we've seen is definitely not that. What we've seen is somebody who is so far from being in the realm of title contention that does not even deserve to be a topic of conversation for the next couple of years. Now, it's not to say that Bo still doesn't have a lot of potential and he doesn't have a high ceiling, because I do believe that he can achieve some great things. Title, it's hard to say that. But can he do well? Yeah, he's got the base and he's got a lot of tools to be able to do so. But one thing that we do need to see is, how does Bo bounce back from a loss? How does Bo bounce back from all of this criticism that he's now receiving in the process? And then also, will we see kind of that dog come alive type of moment from him? Because we saw him kind of tuck tail a little bit the other day, which is easy to say from the sidelines. But he was a fish out of water. And in moments where we would have thought that he had some of the tools in his tool belt to clinch, to body lock, to wrestle, to stop the damage or to limit those things, he did not have the ability to do that against RDR. And I think that that was a very high indicator that Bo needs a lot of work. And his development has not been as rapid as he thinks that it has been, nor as maybe the matchmakers thought that it was. This is now time that he's got to go back in the ranks. He's basically got to almost take the Benoit Sandhagen. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute, but he's got to take a little page out of that now. And let's take some steps back here and let's find some winnable fights. Let's find some matchups out here that we could kind of build our confidence, that we can get some cage time and some experience in the octagon to be able to help us down the way. Get that cage time now that's going to provide that compound interest factor down the way, because experience is 100% a deficiency at the moment. And as I said, it showed in his brightest moment the other night. A few of the other notable bouts that happened on the main card: D-Rod against Santiago Ponzinibbio. Man, that was a couple of old dog vets, guys long in the tooth at the welterweight division. I believe both 38 years old. D-Rod is a guy who, hey, yeah, did he get a little bit tired later on through the fight? Sure, but you're going to get a guy who goes in there and just scraps every single time, and he power punches, which is why he ended up getting tired. He didn't get Ponzinibbio out earlier, but he was able to stay within his mechanics, and his boxing was that tight to where once it came time in the third round, well, he finally put him out. And the picture that's floating around online with Ponzinibbio getting up kind of back to his feet, but walking on zombie legs with D-Rod screaming into the camera, that's a contender for photo of the year. That's going to be one of those shots that throughout the years, there's been a trend from a lot of MMA outlet pages that are the photos that go hard, like the 1 through 10s that are playing, and the part whatever one, blah 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 blah. Those images that have consisted through the years of the Francis Pez dispensering Alistair Overeem, the Robbie Lawler screaming in Rory McDonald's face, those type of images. That is going to be one of those that lives on in history of the images that are told, or the stories that are told through images in MMA. D-Rod is a guy who we're not going to see a title run. We're not going to see him go for gold or try to push a top 5 type of ranking or anything of that sort. But we are going to see him still have some very exciting fights in the mix. He's fought some of the guys who are at the very top of the division, like your Ian Garys of the world. He has wins against very reputable veterans out there, your Tim Means and so on and so forth. Again, Ponzinibbio, it might be about time. He can't take the shots that he once did. And all along in his career, he's always kind of looked a little bit goofy, like baby deer type of legs, kind of slipping all over. It looked even worse the other night. And, sometimes I get it. The canvas can be a little slippery with graphics or sweat, a blood spot, whatever it may be. But whatever it is for Ponzinibbio, he slips and slides more than most. And yeah, even just in the process, with his lack of balance and he just can't take the shots anymore, it might be about time. One of the feel good stories of the card, you had a couple of guys returning back to the UFC. You had Mason Jones taking on Jeremy Lil Heathen Stevens. This was a clash at lightweight. Lil Heathen Stevens, for the majority of his tenure in the UFC, he was a featherweight, but now in his later years, moving up to lightweight. I know that some people online were saying, oh, well, he has the record officially now, most losses in the UFC. Yeah, you can say that. And it is somewhat of it is a dubious honor, if you will. But that also means that he's had that many fights there in the UFC. When he made his debut, I believe Chuck Liddell was champion. So that just puts it in perspective how long he's been doing it and doing it at a high level. It just so happened to work out by the circumstance of them needing to figure out some matchups on the card. And he, after his fight with Eddie Alvarez at Knucklemania, pulled off that successful TKO victory there, reached out to Dana directly and said, hey, you have this card coming to Des Moines. Like, what do I got to do? Like, can we figure something out? And Dana was absolutely open to it. They made it happen. That was an entertaining fight from start to finish. Yes. Did he lose 30-27 on the cards? Sure. I will give you that. That is the facts. That is the bullet point to the story if you want to look at it from a surface level. But if you go back and watch the fight, it was highly competitive. Both guys beat the hell out of each other. And Jeremy Stevens made it competitive. He absolutely had his moments where he was rallying and the momentum was swinging in his direction. But credit to Mason Jones for also being a very credible veteran with a deep arsenal of tools within his skill set that was able to keep on answering every bit of violence that Jeremy Stevens was trying to bring to him. Both guys are veterans who deserve to be on the roster, and I'm looking forward to seeing the type of entertaining fights that they can put forth next. Again, we're probably not looking at definitely not in Jeremy's side, too old and just not in that position, but from Mason's position too, probably not looking at a vet who's going on a title type of run, but we're looking at a guy who has a lot of exciting fights left in the tank. And I love seeing that type of veteran prowess and experience that makes for some of these gritty wars where they can just figure out different moves on the chessboard time after time with each other. Montel Jackson against Daniel Marcos. This was a pretty dominant performance for Montel Jackson. Daniel Marcos took his first loss. And tactically, I don't know that this was the right approach for the Peruvian. I think he played it really safe against Montel Jackson, it's no question what he wants to do. He wants to go out there, knock you out, and put you on a highlight reel. But in Marcos's position, I do believe that you also have to be willing to take some risks in the process to be able to make something happen for yourself. You dropped at 30-27, and it wasn't really a close fight. Some of the matchups to highlight the prelims, I'm a big Jillian Robertson fan. I just think that throughout the years, he's never really been the most boisterous. She just goes out there and fights her ass off and finds ways to win, and she's a finisher. She has some of the most submission finishes on the entire UFC roster. She has some of the most finishes for all of the women ever in history, and for sure of the division, absolutely is the queen of submissions. This time it was by TKO. She took on Marina Rodriguez, while she was on her run following getting signed into the UFC and, that tear that she went on through the early 2020s through the pandemic run was sensational. Now at this stage, she came into this fight coming off of a couple of losses, and now at 38 years old, she laid the gloves down after taking that TKO loss where it again, this wasn't really that close of a fight. Jillian Robertson looked that good. The Savage, as her nickname sake suggests, went out there and dominated in this fight and showed why she deserves to have one of those top ranked opponents next, or taking another step toward the top of the division. And, who knows? Do we see by the end of this year, maybe early around this time next year, do we see her on the outside looking in of a title shot? Who knows? There's definitely some interesting things that are happening, or some potential matchups that could go on at the top of the division there. Again, we don't know what's going to happen with Wei Lee. That's kind of depending on what happens this weekend. But yeah, just rounding off a couple more of those performances. Azmat Bakoyev, this dude is a problem at 185. Another massive first round TKO. Got himself a bonus by finishing Ryan Loder of Ultimate Fighter this last season. Azmat Bakoyev, LFA superstar and standout. He had a huge show-stopping knockout last year for the LFA. Danny, you got to see that in person. That was again, this kid, he punches people's lights out, and he has had fun in the process ever since he's been in the UFC, has finished every fight in the process. And in the following few days on social media, he's kind of been the talk of the underground circles because he's had a ton of fun engaging with the fans, and his responses. They said, "Oh, well, we thought, seeing that you're, a Dagestani guy, that you might have been a wrestler, blah, blah, blah." And he says, "Well, we took the fight here in Des Moines. We thought that all USA was the same. I thought I'd be in Hawaii." Like, he said something along the lines of, "Well, I thought that we would be on a beach," just having fun back and forth with the fans. And, again, he has a sense of humor, and he has an exciting style. Can he wrestle? Absolutely. Is he around a very solid crew at ATT? 100%. Does he have a bright future? Also, yes. And above all, he's entertaining. He's not dry with his personality, and he's willing to go out there and embrace the personality and the engagement from the fans, which is not always something that we see from some of those Eastern Bloc-based fighters. That limits some of their star power. He says, I'm going to go and embrace this. I know that I can be a superstar. Let me keep on paving the path to that. Moving along from that, we're going to talk about a couple of the boxing shows. Running tight with time just to get through everything here today. Boxing, in my opinion, this last weekend, there was a lot of attention that was put on the sport as a whole, and I think they fumbled a golden opportunity over the weekend. I really do. They had 5 headliner matchups, and really only one of them delivered on a high level as far as the actual action goes. But in terms of the actual action itself, let's just run through it. We had the massive event that was scheduled for Times Square, right? Spectacle for the ages to have a boxing ring in the middle of Times Square in New York City. The exposure, the opportunities, the visibility, and they fumbled it. First off, just from a booking perspective, the best guy that they had on that card, in my opinion, is Teofimo Lopez. In terms of an actual legit accredited champion who has proven himself in the squared circle, it is Teofimo Lopez. He was the featured fight. You had in the co-main the disastrous and historically bad and universally, like, the tomato meter is 0% on the Devin Haney fight. I never want to hear Devin Haney's name in the conversation for elite boxing at this stage anymore, at this point. And then you had the Ryan Garcia fight and Rolly Romero in the main event, which just, it wasn't a good fight. Teofimo had a good performance overall, but it was glossed over based off of the other two, and there wasn't really a whole lot of promo done for it, simply because the focus was more or less put on the main and the co-main, which I just think it was a shame because it didn't get the attention that it should have. But overall, what I do think was cool about the event was some of the optics. You don't see that hardly ever, to have the main intersection of such a major metropolis shut down in that sense for an event. And there's a boxing ring right there. And then what you see kind of in the background and the backdrop is on the structures with construction and the high beams and all of that. You see some of the workers, some of the construction workers out there posting up in their lawn chairs and watching the fight from afar. This is something that obviously an event like that, especially if it were going down at, say, MSG, those tickets were a few hundred to a couple grand a piece if you're going inside of a venue like that. A lot of and we talked about this last week with the UFC, with the way the ticket prices are going for some of these events, they're pricing out the blue collar families. They're pricing out a lot of the regular folk who can't say, oh, I can justify spending basically a car payment on a ticket for one person. It just doesn't really happen that way. And seeing the community and the people just up there in the backdrop, it just kind of took me back to this little Italian spot back home that we used to go eat at when I was a kid. It's called Noodles, owned by the Italian family. If any of you down there in Pueblo know about it, but there was the image of all of the construction workers sitting on the high beam, like eating all their lunches out of the lunch pails and whatnot. And I don't know, it just kind of gave me that feel of, this was the heartbeat of the people type of event. And it's just a shame that the event itself didn't necessarily deliver for the spectacle that it could have been. That's, I guess, the best way that I could summarize it. You had Canelo Alvarez, who fought William School, and this was basically a fight where, he checked the box and he got the win. It's not to say that Canelo didn't really try, but it was for sure, it was a formality, especially given that the announcement for the Bud Crawford fight in September came out immediately right after. So they knew that this next fight was happening. That was the right opponent for him to not really have to go in there and take a lot of damage. If you know anything about Cuban Olympic boxing style, that's exactly the approach that William School had. A lot of the Cubans, whether it's him, Thibodeau, a lot of these guys, you can look at their performances, and it's very reflective of everything that you see from the amateur ranks that goes exactly toward that Olympic scored style points of boxing. It wins fights. It's not necessarily the most exciting. Lots of movement, lots of jabs. Doesn't really stand and bang the Mexican style of war that a lot of the Canelo fans were really kind of hoping for. What I thought was the redeeming force of the weekend for boxing, personally, was Nia Inoue. The monster, I think, is one of the bright stars on the rise in boxing, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. And in this fight, he had to kiss the fire and walk away whistling in the process. He faced adversity on the process. He got dropped in the second round. He was starting to get off on Cardenas, and in the end, he got clipped and he got countered in the second round, hits the canvas, gets back up. But as a true champion, as a true warrior in the fashion that he is, he rallied and then got the finish of his own. He hurts him in the 7th, pounces on the finish in the 8th. That's a kid who I think should be marketed as the face of boxing, or for sure that next generation of the face of boxing beyond your guys like Bud and whatnot. I mean, he's in his young 30s, but still, he just doesn't get the rub that I think that he should, for as good as he is in relation to some of the other guys that are out there. I mean, we just talked about we have dudes like Devin Haney who are promoted and put on the forefront out there, and skill set, ass cheeks. You have Nia Inoue out there. The monster is a finisher. I think that he definitely deserves to get a lot more rub than he does. So hopefully this was a fight that helps propel him into a big opportunity. We had Karate Combat also going down. Hey, whatever Smiling Sam Alvey is on, I want it. At any point in time, if you would have told me that Sam Alvey would be a 2-division champion in a striking-based combat sport, I'd asked you what kind of gas you were smoking on. If you were to especially tell me that prior to last week's show that Sam Alvey was going to go out there and knock out Spong, one of the most decorated knockout artists, kickboxers of this generation, and he was going to go out there and flatline him, I thought you were absolutely crazy. But Smiling Sam Alvey is defying the odds and going out there and has became now a multiple division champion in the karate combat promotion. And hey, props to Sam Alvey, because he always, despite his losing streak on the way out of the UFC, which people never shied away from pointing out, he kept a good spirit about him, has continued to fight, and has gone out there and he's found his home. You also had Muhammad Bukayev, who he picked up a win. It was a solid victory, TKO victory for them. He's still not the most refined striker. He has some world-class fighting ability, but again, I think that this is an indicator of who Mokayev is character-wise or as a person, that he was such a penis to deal with on a personal level that the UFC, who lets a lot of character issues slide, let's be completely honest here, they let a lot of character flaws go. They decided that they were cool with letting him walk in free agency. Think how unprecedented or how out of the norm this is for the UFC to let go a guy who was undefeated at 12-0. He was a top 6 ranked guy at just 23 years of age. That should go to tell you just about all you need to know about how Mokayev handles himself on a personal level. Moving along from that, talking here about UFC 315 this weekend going down in Montreal. You have a headline matchup going down between Bilal Muhammad taking on Jack Della Maddalena. In this main event fight, you have Bilal, who is probably one of the most hated champions by the large scale of fans. Some of it do, some of it not. He's just a guy who he's kind of, it started off as a rib of him being in that heel roll, and then it just caught wave. And, you know, if we're being completely honest, though, Bilal is also probably one of the least exciting champions in history, or in recent history. He finds ways to win, and he's a very good fighter. I will 100% give you that. In all of his fights, though, in the UFC, he does not have a knockdown. In all of his fights. Yes, he has the standing TKO against Sean Brady, but again, that was a standing TKO. I think that this is a very winnable matchup for Bilal. I think that he can out-wrestle Jack, especially with all the time that he spent with Eagle Camp and the Nurmagomedovs. Izzy style wrestling in his pocket, spending all those years out there, with Mike Valley, then too in Chicago. On the flip side, Jack could very well send Bilal to the Shadow Realm. Jack is one of the most proficient strikers in the division, and he's in this position for a reason. Has he been out of action for a little while? Yes, he had a couple of injuries and some infectious stuff that he had to deal with at one point. Sure. But again, Jack Della Maddalena, that guy is for real. There's a video that just went out recently. And again, this is from training, and take of it what you will. I know that Craig was letting him work in the process, and Craig is going to push the limits as far as where he's going to let his training partner go, and also because he trusts him. But Craig Jones, one of the best grapplers in the world. When you have Craig Jones in your corner working with you on the grappling side of things, it's going to translate. And we saw that work against Durinho. We also saw him put Craig to sleep a couple weeks ago in training. Again, he was letting him work. So it's a training sequence. Don't think that, oh, he just strangled Craig to sleep. No, that's not what it was. They were working, but he does have that type of drilling with best of the best type of guy on the regular basis in his repertoire. I would like to think that this is going to be an new situation, but again, I would hedge that very closely if you're someone who is shopping the lines out there, because Bilal does have a legit skill set. He's just not entertaining at all. You could go watch one of these, like, you could wait staring here at the wall to see if any of the magnets on these posters are ever going to fall down, and you might have a bit of a more compelling time than watching Bilal. Is what it is. In the co-main event, we have a women's flyweight title fight. You have the Bullet Valentina Shevchenko defending against Manon Fior. Now, I think that it was really cool. They just released it today that that Valentina, she got her ruby plate. She's the first fighter, or the first champion to complete the rubies. For those who don't know, on the new style belts since they moved to this legacy style championship, they get rubies around the little octagon on the side of the belt for every title defense, or for every title win that they have. She is now the first one. Like I say, she's the first one to complete all 8 rubies. So that's, I mean, it's pretty cool. That goes to show how dominant that Valentina has been throughout her years. Yes, did she drop the strap to Alexa Grasso? Certainly. But as a true champion, she rallied back, got it at that Noche card last year, Inside Sphere. And this is going to be her defense against someone who a lot believe to be a very formidable opponent, who has striking credentials that mirror some of what Valentina was able to do prior to making that transition into MMA. I think we see in this fight, how much does Valentina still have left in the tank? Because for the longest time, and I've said it many of points on these airwaves, that it's Valentina and there's the rest of the division. Now, naturally, with time, Father Time creeping in, that gap gets closer and closer. Is this where we start to see maybe a passing of the torch? It'll be interesting to see what that chess match has. Do they duel it out on the feet? Or, I wouldn't be surprised. Valentina is a smart champion. She will not be afraid to make a business decision. She does not care if the crowd decides to boo, if they don't like that, oh, it's not a striker's delight, or they're not brawling it out on the feet. Make no mistake about it. Valentina Shevchenko is perfectly fine if she is getting booed on Saturday night when she decides to grapple, because if the crowd is booing, that means she's winning. She can absolutely out-wrestle and out-grapple Manon Fior. And again, I would not be surprised if that's the approach that she takes, and if we potentially see her grapple for the better majority of that 25-minute contest. A few other notable fights on the main card to address here. We have Jose Aldo taking on Ayman Zahabi. Zahabi being Faraz Zahabi's brother, one of the most heralded coaches in the history of MMA. This is in their home country of Canada. Expect a very fan favorite response for him, but it's almost hard, no matter where you go, whether you're in your home crowd or not, it's hard to beat the fan response that Jose Aldo is going to get at this point, being that he is a Mount Rushmore of the featherweight division and one of the greatest champions in the history of mixed martial arts. Also on the card, you have former women's flyweight champion Alexa Grasso taking on Natalia Silva. This is a fun fight. You have Grasso trying to get herself back in the winner's circle, while you have Silva, who is making a climb. She's undefeated so far in the UFC. She's very athletic and dynamic with her striking. She uses that split stance and covers distance very well. She likes to use that side kick. Alexa Grasso, very crisp in her boxing. She's going to need to try to figure out a way to get inside and keep the action a little bit tighter in that mid to short range against Natalia Silva. Styles clash of a couple of different mixes of striking that should be for a pretty entertaining performance. Also, you have Benoit Saint-Denis taking on Kyle Prepelic. This was a fight that was originally one that, man, you had banger written all over it with the Joel Alvarez matchup, Alvarez being out due to injury. A couple of other top tier guys at 155 pounds raised their hand and were volunteering to take that fight with Benoit Saint-Denis. Saint-Denis turned those guys down, and he fights Kyle, who Kyle fought in the UFC a couple of times a few years ago, lost both of those fights, and then is now making a return into the UFC here on this short notice. A lot of people are throwing shade in BSD's direction, saying that, oh, he's ducking, he's a coward, blah, blah, blah. I think that that is some unfounded criticism. Yes, you can say that, oh, he did take on some. Well, on that short of notice to go on and take on Rombansky or Gamera or some of those elite killers, I don't think that that would have been a wise choice for him to take on one of those guys on such short notice. I thought that him taking the Alvarez fight to begin with was problems. He is in a position right now where obviously he's favored by the UFC. He's gotten some very interesting matchups that could help build him and high placement on cards very early in his run. They think highly of him. A third loss in a row, and if you would have taken one of those top tier guys where the chances of being put on a highlight reel definitely get increased, his push, if he goes 3 in a row, that is basically gone. He has a chance now, though, against Kyle to go out there and just get a win. Get some confidence back in the process. Get your legs back underneath you after taking back-to-back KO TKO losses. This, in my opinion, was a smart business decision for BSD. What do you guys think, though? Let me know on social media. That's Jordan Kurtz at Comments from the Peanut Gallery. This pay-per-view is going to be going down. Early prelims will be on Fight Pass as well as ESPN Plus. Prelims, ESPN Plus. You're going to also then have that pay-per-view card going down at 8 o'clock here Mountain Time. Lots of mixes and matches of contenders, prospects, and everything in between. This weekend, you have PFL with 2 shows. If you're interested in that at all, you have Paul Hughes, who fought Usman Nurmagomedov for the Bellator lightweight title. Probably one of the better lightweights out there in the world who isn't signed to the UFC. If you have any interest in checking him out, PFL Middle East, North Africa doesn't have any real big household names, but there's definitely some solid records that are out there on the card. Could be some guys who materialize on these bigger shows here in the near future for those who are interested in the regional scene. We also have LFA 208 going down back out in Santa Cruz, California. You have a lightweight division showdown with Chris Bacate taking on Javier Reyes. You also have the highly touted prospect in the strawweight division, Alina David, on the card. Moving along, though, we have 3 rounds. My man, Danny Bailey, behind the board. What's up?
All right, Jordan. First round. Darren Till, who is scheduled to box next week, said he's open to an MMA return in the PFL. What was your first reaction?
Before Darren Till was signed to this fight, and especially after beating Jake Paul's gym sock, Anthony Taylor, he said he wanted to get back into the UFC and that he thought that he would give Dricus some of the worst issues of anybody in the top of the division, and said that he was giving him problems before his knee popped in that fight, blah, blah, blah. He wants another chance. The response? Crickets. Look, Darren Till is a fan favorite. He drives interest. His promos, his interviews, his antics, they're all wildly entertaining. And I've met Darren. I've been in the room with Darren Till before. He's one of those guys who just has an energy about him that he owns the room. He's just one of those aura type of guys. He has the it factor. However, in MMA at the highest of levels, his skill set's topped out. Him specializing in boxing over the last couple of years doesn't really help that he can't grapple his wiener out of his drawers on a cold day. All of that being said, I do think that he can go make a run in the PFL because skill set wise, I think that outside of your Johnny Eblins or some of those guys who have really, really good wrestling at 185 pounds, he can go out there and he could put on really good fights and make a run for them. But as far as in the UFC, I don't know that he has that top run in him anymore. And I don't know that he wants to put in the work in the grappling department to be able to turn that corner and not just be a gatekeeper and someone that names get built off of. Again, I think that Darren Till is one of the more entertaining guys of his era, but he is also a major tale of what if, because that part of his game never really got better. It was exposed from the title shot where he lost to Tyron Woodley, and from there on out, guys like Brunson, DDP, if you can wrestle him, you can beat him.
Davison Figueiredo has come out and said that he was dealing with health issues that left him at less than 100% going into last Saturday's main event. What are your thoughts?
Lame. Seriously, though, I think it's so lame when guys come out with a laundry list of excuses after a fight as to why this or why that. You had a bad approach in the fight, and you got beat. Plain and simple. And yes, could having a staph infection have impacted your performance and your energy or your output and all of that? Sure. I'm not going to deny the effects of the infection or the antibiotics or any of those sorts of things. But also in your statement saying that, well, it was your own fault. You said that you had a couple of scratches from training that you didn't take care of properly, that you allowed to get infected. So you allowed for this to be the case. That can't then be an excuse when it comes fight time. Also, blaming, being sick or having, he said that he had a bit of a jaw injury during camp. Well, you still took the fight. If you would have went out there and if the tail was different and you TKO'd Corey or you go out there and get a victory right away, are we being told about your staph infection? Are we being told that, oh, you had this injury that prevented you from doing all of your training throughout camp? That's usually never the case. We only hear these excuses when it doesn't go somebody's way. And it drives me up a wall because it takes away from the merits of the accomplishment from your opponent. And I think that whether he was sick or not, that doesn't change the fact that he got his ass whooped by Corey Sandhagen.
Arman Sarukian has turned down a fight with Mateusz Gamrot and said the UFC has angered me with this offer. Is Arman making a mistake?
I absolutely think that Arman is making a mistake. I think that he is putting himself in a real sticky predicament. He already had the situation where he had the back injury that was a last-minute pullout against Islam Makhachev that fizzled a main event. So when you're looking at it from a business perspective, that's how many dollars that were spent in the buildup of that fight and the marketing and so on and so forth for Arman for that fight. A lot that got thrown down the drain at the very last minute for what many believe, and can't say for absolute certainty, so I'll throw the blanketed alleged statement over the top of it, but he wasn't going to make the weight. He was not going to make the weight, so rather than miss weight and not be able to fight and earn the title, he pulled out. Have that on pretty good authority from a lot of people out there, but again, it's not something that we can confirm, so that's all just the alleged circumstances of how that went down. Then you have an opportunity against a guy like Mateusz Gamrot, who he's kind of in the position that Arman was in prior to having those couple of top-ranked fighters that got him in that number one ranked spot. Gamrot is having trouble finding opponents. Well, the UFC offered him that fight, and Arman has the entitled position to say, oh, why should I gift him that fight when I'm 1, he's 10, when it's kind of tough, especially at lightweight, when anybody basically in that top 10 can trade a win or a loss on any given night. I think that him turning that fight down runs the chance that now you're not going to get a title shot again right away. Dan's already came out and said that. And then now with you being offered number 10, that should prove to you that you are not getting the title fight next. You need to fight somebody or maybe a fight or two in the process to get yourself back into the title mix. You messed that up. Turning this fight down and then speaking out against the company, and then also now it being known that Arman comes from money back in Armenia. I think that kind of entitled stance and positioning, the UFC feels that he doesn't really have a leg to bargain on in the first place, given his circumstances, and then holding a position of entitlement. I just don't see that going well in the long run for him. You're either looking at getting shelved for a little bit, or you're getting a very, very difficult matchup in what might be a title eliminator type of fight next. But it's not going to be a favorable matchup. It's not going to be something that they are giving you a whole ton of push for. And if you keep on biting the hand that feeds you, after a while, they're going to treat you like that chihuahua that just pees on the carpet one too many times, and you're going to go by the wayside. Just like that, though, folks, we are all out of time. We want to thank you all so much for tuning in. Let us know what you think. Hit us up on social media. If you have any thoughts on the cards this weekend, let us know. If you have any input on the Arman situation or any of the other topics that we covered today, hit me up, Jordan Kurtz, at Comments from the Peanut Gallery on Instagram or Threads. We'll be back here next week, same time, same place, from the number 38. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Follow me along at the Peanut Gallery.